It's perfect.
All right, there we go. Despite some technical difficulties, I think we're all ready to go finally. How is everyone this evening? Good. All right. Okay. Welcome everybody. My name is David Blevins, and I'm one of the creators of Apache TomEE, and it's pretty special. So two things. One, this is the first time I've given a presentation sitting down. This is very strange. Normally I'm standing. Sitting is so, I don't know, lecture-like. Okay, so who uses Tomcat? Let's just start with that one. Yes, exactly. All right. Second question, who also uses another app server like JBoss or Glassfish or WebLogic WebSphere? Most of the hands, and that was about 3/4 of the room. So that's what I find is typically the situation, is that you tend to get as far as you can with Tomcat, and then you have to switch to some other app server in order to fill in the gaps that are not there in Tomcat. And so that leaves us in a very sort of strange position all the time, to always have to be talking about which one should we use. Are we going to use EE for this project, or we're going to use Tomcat? And the two sides, they battle it out, and they try and argue which one is better. And I guess we kind of got sick of that argument. And so we decided, hey, let's make Tomcat an EE server, and then we don't have to have that argument anymore. And so, you have a question?
Why do we have so many versions of TomEE?
Well, I'll answer that question when I get to that section of the slides. But the question was, why do we have so many versions? Yeah, so let me just move on then. And so I would say, here's a quote that kind of describes like maybe the last 10 years of my particular learning. I love this quote because it doesn't end the way you think it's going to end. So the quote is, "Good decisions come from experience." Now that's a very wise, sagely thing to say. Then the second part is, experience comes from bad decisions. And so, you know, I was involved in other open source EE projects. I was one of the founders of Geronimo, for example. And it ended up being pretty complicated, and what people did anyway was just use Tomcat. So at a certain point in your life, you're like, hey, why don't we just give people what they want? So what we did was, you know, when we created TomEE, I think this little XKCD cartoon sort of describes, it's about automation, but it describes what we normally think about, or what we normally experience when we're trying to do all this stuff on Tomcat. So you start out and you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to add these things, and then it's going to be completely smooth sailing, and I'll have this beautiful framework, and I can just use it forever. And then you get started and you're like, oh, how do I integrate this together? How do I integrate that together? You start tracking down and reading blog posts, and then the time that you're spending doing all this work so that you can someday do work starts to really increase, and it never stops, because every time a new technology comes out, like batch, you're right back at the beginning having to do all that stuff. So it's Yeah, it's a trap that we sort of all fall into. And so, and this is where we can answer that question, is what we do to make TomEE is we basically add these various components into Tomcat. We take a Tomcat zip file, we unzip it. We add in these various components, and then we actually fill in a lot of the integration code which is required to make them truly work together. And we zip it back up. We run it through the JavaEE TCK, and out come the other side is TomEE. And so the reason we have multiple versions of it is because we're very, very sensitive of a couple different things. One is that we don't want people to see all these things that they're trying to avoid and go, oh, I didn't want those anyway. So we have a flavor of TomEE which is basically the web profile. And it doesn't go beyond the web profile at all. And, but the web profile doesn't have a few things which are fairly common, such as in EE6, it didn't even have JAX-RS. So we've added that. It doesn't have JMS, so we add that TomEE Plus. And so we try to basically, have 3 different flavors basically for people so that they can pick the one that they want. What we find in practice is that people get started with the lightest version, and then they end up just going straight to the TomEE Plus version because it's not much bigger. So we have basically these flavors.
Yes, I was going to ask, is there a flavor which is the full E spec? Because what you said is you are starting with TomEE, maybe you are going to TomEE, TomEE Plus Plus. However, you still have this issue because at some point maybe you want to do something else and you have to switch to JBolt or...
Right, yeah, so we definitely want to avoid that. And so, TomEE Plus version contains basically the most current, still used EE technologies above and beyond, basic web profile. So TomEE Plus does not contain Corba. So if you can live without Corba, you're good, right? But Corba's in EE full, right? It's in the full profile, and so it's one of the contributors of slowness and speed and, yeah, and it doesn't contain JAX RPC, so that was the first version of, right, exactly, rarely old. Has anyone ever used JAX RPC? Yeah, so there's 3, I ask that question every time, and it's always like 3 hands. It doesn't seem to matter how big or small of a room, and I say the same thing every time, like, so, I salute you because I had to implement JAX RPC, and that was no fun at all. And yeah, so we don't contain any of those things in TomEE Plus, but we do, of course, have full JMS support. There's full JAX WS. And in fact, the JAX WS support has WS security integrated on top of Tomcat realms. And so that's one of the things that normally if you're going to like plop CXF onto Tomcat, you got to figure out the security portion all on your own. And so then you're going to go hunt down Spring Security or something like that, and then you got to do some wiring. And well, we just have that ready to go for you right outside the gate, right out of the box. And so you can take your favorite Tomcat realm, your JDBC realm, LDAP realm, and now you can get WS security, username, password, all that kind of stuff, right, good to go right outside the box. Okay, so the greatest hits of what is TomEE. It's not TomEE, it's TomEE as in the name. So that's like, Nginx is Nginx, it's not, I don't even know how you would pronounce it. Anyway, so we call it TomEE just to be sort of fun, so it's, Tomcat plus EE equals TomEE, that's where we get the name. It's currently web profile 6 certified, 7 is in progress. We built it from all Apache components, although we recently came out with a version of TomEE that has Mohara as the JSF implementation and Eclipse Link as the JPA implementation to make it very ideal for people who are switching from, say, Glassfish or WebLogic over to TomEE, then they don't have to port or retest their entire JSF layer. JSF is very difficult to test. Your eyes, basically, or you have Selenium tests, but who tests all of their code? Who tests some of their code? Okay. See, I didn't even get all the hands on some. Like, that was a pretty low bar.
Define some.
Yeah, anything at all.
At least one test.
Yeah. By any definition that you personally would accept, do you test any of your code? Okay, we got less hands than that one. Hands are wearing out, the arms are getting tired, asking too many questions. Whose arms still work? Okay, all right. So we got about 70% of the room whose arms are working. I wish the 30% of you a speedy recovery. Okay. So we have 3 simple goals that we like to adhere to when we implement TomEE and when we make TomEE. So the first one is we want it to be simple, and that's like the core tenet. So a lot of EE servers out there tend to invent a lot of additional concepts for modularity and things like that. I don't think those are bad. I think those serve the market very well. However, there should be something for people who don't really care about that stuff and just want basically Tomcat plus some other things. And so we try to keep TomEE as simple as possible. That's what we all love about Tomcat, and if we took away the simplicity when we added the EE portion, we are asking people to make a trade-off that people don't want to make. And so we want it to be as simple as possible all the time. So you're probably never going to see an OSGI version of TomEE ever. Yeah, exactly. I know you're all heartbroken, so you can add that yourself on top if you want that. And you know, so the other one is, of course, Tomcat. We have to be Tomcat. Now, it sounds like the first thing I described, but it's actually very different. So when we say that, what we mean is we're not going to remove any portion of Tomcat. You know, so when we're integrating these things together, if there's some existing code in Tomcat which does X, we're going to use that. We're not going to add our own and replace, like, say, the Tomcat JNDI for our own JNDI. We add all the stuff into the Tomcat JNDI. We're not going to make our own deployment process. No, we're going to use the Tomcat deployment process. We're going to augment it. And we're going to use the Tomcat configuration files whenever possible. And so we're going to do everything the Tomcat way. So we're not looking to make a competing server to Tomcat. We're just basically looking to make another edition of Tomcat. And that's the way we like to think of it. You know, so we basically like to think of Tomcat as the base edition, TomEE Web Profile as the second edition of Tomcat, and then so on. And so if your app works on Tomcat and it doesn't work on TomEE, we consider it to be a very huge bug, and we'll want to fix that. And so if that turns out to be the case, if you go to change something and migrate something, let us know and we'll address it immediately. And then of course the last one is we want to be certified. And so that's where I think people don't really know what certification means. So let me just, before I cheat, like, so the people use an app server, all right? The 3/4 of you, who knows what a TCK is? The 3/4 of you who raised your hands before. I think we had now maybe like 7 hands that went up, which is, you know, not a lot. So we put a lot of value on EE, but we don't really know what it is. And so here's the scoop. When you're a vendor and you want to be an EE server, you get issued this very large test suite that you have to pass. And you can't call yourself EE until you pass it. There are tens of thousands of tests in this test suite. It's not small. And that's what EE is to me, because that's what I've been implementing for the last 15 years, is passing that test. So when people say EE is like too complicated and it's a lot of specifications, it's like, yeah, it's a lot of specifications, but forget all that for a moment. It's all the work that we have to do to pass all those tests that you get the benefit of that is significantly different than when you were to take all these things yourself and put them in a Tomcat. If you can get that and have it get all these tests passed, that's a very big win for you. And so for us to actually make TomEE at all, which makes it different than when you might throw these libraries together, is one, we have to write all the integration code to make it past the EETCK, which sort of makes it sound big and heavy again, right? But TomEE is like 29 megabytes. That's the web profile version, and the plus version, which has like all the really good EE stuff, is 45. So There's not a single version of TomEE that's over 50 megabytes in size. It boots and recompasts the entire EETCK, the web profile version of it, without increasing the JVM memory. So it runs on a Raspberry Pi. You know, you can do all sorts of things with it because it's very light. That really has to do with the way that we make TomEE. I think because we want to keep it simple, we just take and integrate both components together. All the things that are required to integrate, we just do it point to point. We don't add a lot of complexity. So one of the things that we did on Geronimo was we had this very big modular system, and all components that needed to be integrated in Geronimo had to be turned into a module. And we had a framework for deployment, so everything had to match that framework. And so you're taking like round pegs and making them square shaped so you can fit them into this perfect molds of systems. So you end up adding more code, and yeah, you get a slower server in the end. It's you know, a cost. I like to describe the difference between, you know, I'm not going to pick on other vendors. I'm just going to talk about Geronimo and TomEE. The difference between the two of them, I would describe Geronimo would be a desktop. You can replace any particular component, but you end up with a desktop size server, you know, and TomEE is like a laptop. Everything's integrated straight in, so we try to be very tight with it. I think that people, you know, like, oh, can I have the server without X because X is really heavy? It's like, it might be heavy if you did it, you know, in the old-fashioned way. But I find that when you integrate things so tightly together that they don't notice, because the speed of the server boots up very quickly, they stop asking you to remove certain things because it's more of a waste of their time than anything. It's not, you know, when you integrate things together well enough and they don't have to have the standard trade-off of having it be a slower server, they stop caring what's inside the box, which is why I say people always start with the web profile version of TomEE, and then before they're in production, they're almost always on the plus version, because there's very little difference in speed between them. Yeah.
However, still I want to ask, so for example, we are forgetting Glassfish and WebSphere, which is a joke, but WebLogic, I haven't used the Oracle WebLogic, but the BIA WebLogic was great, and the new JBoss is also great.
Yeah.
So why someone will, also you said about Geronimo, but why someone will use TomEE instead of JBoss, or, yeah, if he has a lot of money, maybe he will buy WebLogic, but
no, I think the answer is really simple. So the question.
Small and fast. Is this the most common reason why you are choosing TomEE? Because it's small, it takes a little memory to start, and it's basically fast. Is this the?
No, I mean those are great things, of course. But I think that the primary thing is that if you're a Tomcat user, that's your server. You know. And so we tried to, we were looking to fill a very specific need when we made TomEE. You know, I've said, you know, before, we don't think the other servers are bad, and the fact that they've gotten faster is a great thing. It doesn't diminish the need for TomEE. We wouldn't stop developing it tomorrow, although, you know, so and such server is also fast, so we don't have to exist anymore. It still doesn't solve the problem where Tomcat's 50% of the market, and that means 50% of the market is basically reinventing the wheel when they go to add all the various portions of things right on. And so it does make it very difficult. If you're like Atlassian or something like that, you want to write some software and have it run on all the servers. It's like, here are all the EE servers, here's Tomcat, okay, have fun making a product that's going to run on all the servers. You know, it really sort of is a kind of holding us back as an industry, because we want everything to run outside an EE server all the time. But what we're really saying is, I'm using Tomcat or I'm using Jetty, and I don't have all those things there, so therefore I don't want you to tie in all these other things. But like I say, you know, if you did actually just do it the way people would want it, maybe it wouldn't be such a big deal anymore. And so it was an experiment for us to create TomEE in the first place. You know, we didn't know actually if we could certify it at all. We had no confidence in our ability to do that, because we didn't know if the specifications were going to stand in our way at some point and say, all right, you know, you would need to do X or Y, and Tomcat isn't going to allow that to happen, and so therefore you couldn't complete the certification. Because like I say, when we integrate this stuff together, we use the Tomcat lifecycle. You know, Tomcat has a before start, after start, before deploy, after deploy, all these basic things, and we were never going to diverge from that at all to get EE done. And so we thought, well, there's probably going to be a time where we're going to hit a limit and go, we can't cross this unless we dramatically change Tomcat in some way. Because I've done integrations with Tomcat on the other side of things, and we always had to change something. And so we weren't sure. But we went ahead and did it, and we actually did manage to get all the way through. And so I think persistence pays off. But we're the only ones who actually integrate Tomcat into an EE server, and that way everybody else strips it down and they throw it into their server in some sort of very, very minimal form. And so the fact that it's Tomcat under the covers doesn't benefit you at all, because you can't use the server XML config file, you can't use the startup scripts that are common, you can't just drop things into the web. It's not the same thing. So yeah, it would still serve a very significant need, even if speed was even across all the servers. Yeah, so I think this is the most special thing about TomEE. So this was like 2011, maybe like April. We held a get together, and we were on the mailing list, and we just invited everybody, hey, let's go and find a week, and we'll all get together and hack on TomEE. And so a bunch of us all took vacation from work, and then traveled to this place, Tour of France, and then we all hacked on TomEE for like the whole week, and we had just amazing time, and that's like really special. One, you don't find people who are willing to pay to work, and then two, it was so great. So we ran the TCK twice a day. So I didn't really mention in this other slide. We actually, when we run TomEE, we do the TCK testing, we do it all on Amazon EC2. So we'll have basically 800 chunks of tests that we have, and then we'll put them on an active MQ We'll fire up a whole bunch of spot instances, and then they'll all pull down a test, do their test, and then push it back. And so we can get through the TCK in about an hour and a half, which is pretty impressive. Because it would take about a week to run it linearly. And so anyway, so we all got together. We worked, we would work in the morning, and then we would run the TCK in the afternoon, and then we would work through the afternoon. We would run the TCK while we're having beers, and looking at the results on our cell phone and stuff like that. And we started out the week like 40% compliant. We ended the week at 80% compliant. And I think it's just a sign of, one, how agile the community is, how passionate we are. And I just think it's the reason that that TomEE exists at all, is these people. And so, I mean, they're my personal heroes. So thanks to the community, I think, is where I'm going with that. So, anybody would say J2EE? No? I have a couple things that, in case that's your last point of reference. So one, it's not J2EE anymore. And so that's, recruiter says, hey, you want to be on a J2EE project? So it's like, I don't have a time machine, so I couldn't do that. So one, quick hits. What's changed about EE that we may not have noticed? The web profile, as we've talked about consistently, which maybe we don't all know about. So who's aware of what the web profile, who's heard of the web profile before today? Okay, so that wasn't all the hands. It needs to be all the hands. So, people say EE is big and bloated and heavy? Yeah, I'm going to tell you they're correct. So, basically, you can't have a standard that doesn't drop technology and then not become big and heavy after the 15 years. If you have to keep things in there for backwards compatibility reasons, then the number of things is only going to grow. That means what you end up with over year after year is going to be bigger and bigger. And so at a certain point in EE6, we decided to acknowledge that this was the case, and to try and figure out a way to give people what they need in terms of some minimally functional stuff that contains the most current used EE technology, but without all the legacy. And so what we did was we created the web profile, and that is basically half of the specifications that are in the full, now what's called the full profile. You know, so here's full profile, there's the web profile. And so it's significantly smaller in terms of number of specifications. I think the full profile contains some 30 plus, and the web profile is at the 15 mark. And some of those 15 are really small, not real specifications, like they consider the JavaEE annotation package to be a spec. You know, there's like 5 to 10 annotations in that whole thing. So, yeah. So there's not actually a lot that's in the web profile in terms of, you know, it sounds a lot, 15, is really only like 5. It's JSF, EJB, CDI, JPA, Transaction Manager, and you know, that's basically the core stuff. EAR files, yeah, that's another one. Oh, I hate EAR files. I could never use EE. EAR files suck. Yes, they do. They're horrible. So what we did was in EE6, we made it so you could put everything into the WAR file, and you know, because what would happen is with EAR files, it's very like Russian doll packaging. You know, you got a jar with classes. You throw that into your web app INF lib directory. You make that into a jar, and then you put that into another jar. Next to it are your EJB jars and your third-party libraries, and then you package the whole thing up, and you have like just a huge mess. And you know, the funny thing about EAR files is what the container has to do is undo everything you just did. We gotta extract your EAR, we gotta extract your WAR files, and then like flatten everything else, so it's basically, you know, just a regular old class path again. So yeah, you give us this thing full of all these Russian dolls, first thing we do is just take them out. Thanks guys, thanks, appreciate it, thanks. You know, and so we decided, hey, let's make it so people can put all that stuff in the web app, and you don't have to have all the crazy packaging stuff. So you would get very far with the web app, and the second you wanted to use something like an EJB, you had to change all your build over. That's a pain in the butt. So WAR files are the new EAR file. EARs are dead, and so, you know, long live WAR files. The other one is testability. So who's heard of Archillion? Okay, that again needs to be 100% of the room. I think we got maybe 10.
We had a session about Archillion a few months ago.
Okay, you guys didn't attend, or your memories are very short.
Every one of us who raised their hands is because of him. You know?
Okay, yeah. Is blame the word used when it's a good thing? Yeah. I blame you for the 10%, and I praise somebody else for the other 90, I guess, if it's opposite day. Wait. Let me see if I can get this correct. Good for you for learning Archillion, and bad for you for not. Yeah, that's a tricky one for me. Okay. Yeah, so Archillion is this wonderful testing framework, and so basically the story of Archillion is that Red Hat had to write a TCK. So all this whole testing process that I described, they added 2 specifications into EE, CDI and beam validation, and then they had to do all the tests for them. So they were like, well, we're not going to use the Oracle test suite. We're going to write our own, and it's going to be an open source. We're not going to use this proprietary thing. So they wrote one, and after they got that experience, they're like, let's do it again, but cleaner. And so that's what Archillion turned into. And so the magic of Archillion, it comes from, you know, the sheer fact that they made a test suite that all the vendors have to pass. So therefore, all the vendors now have to be responsible for their own adapters. And so there have been other testing frameworks that have tried to do what Archillion does, like Cargo, but Cargo ran out of steam. It doesn't exist anymore, really. I mean, there might be some usages of it, but the hard part of these testing frameworks is getting the vendors to actually take ownership of their adapters and maintain them release after release after release. That's a done deal if they're required to for certification purposes. If they want to pass the CDI or beam validation test suite, they need to keep their Archillion adapters up in good shape. And so it's a very neat thing. All right, let's actually see some code. Okay, so I have this tiny little project. Yeah, I can here. Let's. Yeah. Okay.
No.
Okay. I won't even say how about now. That's yeah. Fairly legible, I think. Okay, good. Okay, so I have this basic project. I'll show where the URL of it is. GitHub. If I can type GitHub. Oh, no internet connection. I won't show you that. I'll give you the link. All right, so idea palm. So this little project, you can fork it on GitHub. And so basically it takes TomEE, it takes Archillion, and it gets them to working together in a nice little small project. This project, and I will increase the font on the code when it shows up, but there are only 3 classes in this whole project. There's a JAXB class, a RESTful service, and then a test case. There are no XML files in this project, and there are no third-party libraries other than TomEE and Archillion. And so we have a basic JAX-RS component. We've got a getter, we've got a post, and we have another get. This one will produce JSON. I can even increase this font a little bit bigger. And this method returns a color object, and we can see that color is a simple JAXB class. We have a simple JUnit test suite, test class. It runs with Archillion. That's how you specify that you want to use Archillion as your testing framework. Archillion is an extension to JUnit. And so what we have is we have to, the basic way you use Archillion is you make a little mini web app right there in your test case, you deploy it. Archillion will inject the URL of your test, of the running server, into the test case, and then you can just write regular old test code. So we'll go ahead and run this.
When this test was first written, by the way, because the whole idea of extending the asset is kind of a old style. I mean,
Yeah, I get it. I know. Yeah, so.
When was the first time when this test was written?
No, recently, because I'm really lazy. Like, I think it's totally cool that we are no longer inheriting from test case, but then I habitually reformat my code, and then I have to always be importing the assert this, assert that in there, and I kind of get sick of typing that code over and over again. I think to myself, why am I doing that? Because it's cool to not inherit from anything, but I'm wasting my own time. I don't care. I'm putting it in there. So, yeah, that's why that's in there. Yeah. So that went ahead and ran, and so there's a couple interesting things. One, I can do this from the command line as well. And I can test that as there. This is using an embedded version of TomEE, so it's like a Jetty type of a thing. And so all that is running in a single JVM, and you can do plain old debugging on it and things like that. And like I say, this, so there's that. Let's show what that might be. Here we go. We're going to put a breakpoint right there. And then we're going to run this thing with debug. All right. So now we're in debugger. We're debugging our service code. And you notice I didn't have to start a server in advance. I didn't have to connect with a remote debugger. I didn't have to do all sorts of things, like you didn't even have to package up my web app. I'm a really big fan of just plain old Java SE style coding. I actually really don't like to have to run a build and package things up and all that stuff. When things start getting that way, I lose interest really quickly. And I really couldn't expect anybody else to think differently. So we try to keep TomEE usable in a plain Java SE fashion as much as possible. And ideally, you would deploy it in a server only at the last moment. And you could just sit there in all day and develop in a plain Java SE fashion and walk through your code and debug it like you would any other Java SE code and not have to sacrifice that just to use EE. I think that's something I hope we're going to see change more and more. We added in EE6 an embedded EJB container testing API, and allows you to do SE stuff with EJB. I hope in EE8 we can actually add that for all of the EE spec. So this is actually sort of, non-standard in the sense that it's using an embedded container. It's not required by the specifications, which are allowed to do it. I would like it to be a requirement. All the servers should have to do that. That would be only beneficial for everybody. Okay, so that is basic Archillion usage. We also have a nice little Maven adapter, a Maven plugin. So we have, of course, our target directory with our war file here. Any project that's a war project, if you have in your palm, and I will increase the font, this little plugin, you can basically run that war file right there from the command line with Maven. And you can do some pretty fancy things with that plugin. So it's the TomEE Maven plugin. I'll go ahead and Maven, TomEE, run. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to unpack a TomEE server. We're going to take your war file, we're going to put it into the server, we're going to boot it up, and then it'll be running. So there it is. There's our started thing. So, yeah. So there we go. We have a nice REST response right there. So we actually just executed the code that was, right there in the server, and we didn't have to do the standard dance of, change directory, remove the war file, move the new war file in, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now go over to the browser, hit refresh. Oh, it didn't work. Let's do it again. You spend all day doing that. That's no fun. So we wrote this little plugin, and you can actually do some pretty neat things with it. You can even say, take these Maven dependencies and move them into the lib directory. And that can be your driver, your JDBC driver, and things like that. You could even say, remove this library and from the lib directory. You can have multiple web apps that you copy in. So technically speaking, you could use it to provision a server if you wanted to. You could just have a little POM file, and then no code in it. Make sure all your web apps are deployed in Nexus repo, and then just say start my server, and it will unpack and zip and provision everything right there. So it's pretty neat. You can put your config files right in your project file, in your somewhere in your test or source main or source resources, and everything's good to go. So that's trivial stuff. So let me show you a bigger, more realistic looking web app. So one, this URL is not going to work, but I have it in my history, so you can take notes if you want. That little starter project. TomEE Jackson. Here would be the URL to go to. Here. Is that big enough? All right, there it is. Basically, it's in our TomEE Tribe repo on GitHub. So go grab it from there. Okay. So Antonio Gonçalves, he wrote a more modern version of the proverbial old pet store application. And so I'll show it because it's fun. Let me close this other. So this is, it modernized to TEE6, and there would be basically no changes for EE7. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to use the TomEE Maven plugin to run this thing so you can see it. So the thesis of this application is it basically will load up a bunch of data and you can buy pets and various things like that. It uses bean validation, JPA, JSF, EJB, and JAX-RS. So it tries to hit the greatest hits of common things that we typically use. There are no third-party libraries in this web app at all, so this is running, but I'm just going to do like a jar TVF of the web app itself. Pet store, war. So you can't really see, but there's just the Derby stuff in there and prime faces, but you didn't have to put any REST APIs or libraries in there. If we go to now localhost 8080, we see an extremely beautiful, modern-looking UI. I hear that this is the way things are going to be done in the future, so you guys should just like catch on the trend. Embossed bevels are back in style, baby. I think that's the moral of the story here. So you have a bunch of pets and things like that in here, and as I think these things kind of get really boring, and I added some pets. So there's an angelfish, and there's fishbone, and goldfish, and great white, and so I put bands in there that have pets in there.
Where are the cat videos?
The cat, yeah, there are no cat videos. I should have been super trendy. I do in cats, I have Def Leopard, that's a cat, right? Yeah, yeah. White lion, that's a cat. Birds, I have the eagles. Yeah, the yardbirds. So, side note, who knows any of the guitarists that were in the Yardbirds? Who's ever heard of the Yardbirds? It was this old band, yeah, right. Yeah, it was this band, and basically like Jimmy Page played in it from Led Zeppelin, and Eric Clapton played in it, and Jeff Beck, and lots of people. It seemed like if you wanted to be a big guitarist, you had to play for the Yardbirds, and if you were the Yardbirds, you were guaranteed to always be having to hire another guitarist. Anyway.
Looks like Google, yes?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we have a bunch of data in this project. You can do all sorts of standard stuff. I don't need to show you too much of the UI, but there's an interesting thing about this. So we like to change things in TomEE a lot. I mean, implementing EE is fun, but making new EE technology is even more fun. And so we did something neat in this one. So I'm going to show you the way it was vanilla. and then I'm going to show you our changed version of it, and we're going to decide which one you would use. Okay, so here's the vanilla one. We have domain package. This is where all of our entities are. So this is just standard JPA stuff. And it has a bunch of named queries in there. And it's standard data access things. And so
What's the provider of JPA?
This one's going to use OpenJPA. Yeah, but you can swap that stuff out. So JPA is one of the only specifications.
JPA is embedded with this configuration.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, JPA is one of the only standardly swappable EE components. So JSF can't standardly swap it out, but in practice you probably can if you work really hard on it. Yeah, having to work hard is the reason that TomEE exists. So you don't have to work hard for that stuff, but you should work hard for other things. Everybody should work hard, right? We all work hard, don't we? Yeah. Our bosses are here. We're going to ask. We're going to say we work hard. We're all being recorded. Okay.
So is this mean that when you are switching to the other JSF implementation, you will drop the my faces, or you will have the two?
Oh, we're going to maintain them forever. Yeah, we're always going to maintain. Yeah. So.
Because you said that you will probably switch to Jara from my faces for the next version of EE.
Nope. We're going to always maintain a Mahara integration, and we're always going to maintain a MyFaces integration. We have both, as I said, because if you're moving from Glassfish or WebLogic, that uses Mahara, and that'll be easier to migrate. If you're coming from the WebSphere side, then you're going to have a much better experience going to a MyFaces-based server. And so we keep them both there, and we run them both to the TCK. In fact, I think we're the only vendor supporting both and TCK testing them. Same with Eclipse Link. We actually run Eclipse Link through the TCK with TomEE, and we run OpenJPA through the TCK with TomEE. It only costs us like half a beer to run the TCK, so it's like less than a 6-pack a day, which a lot of us can afford that ourselves. But maybe nobody here drinks that much. I don't know. Maybe it's just Ivan. Okay. So we have the standard boilerplate that we would normally see is in a piece of code that uses JPA. We have the standard find me a named query, fill in the parameters, then go ahead and get the result and return it. And if you notice, like 80% of this code is doing the same thing over and over and over again. Find me all the products by the product name. So we'll have a little named query, we'll fill in the name, we'll execute it, we return the result. And we're just doing the same thing over and over again. Who has code that looks like this? Everybody, yeah. And so Spring Data, for example, has basically an approach where you can have the interface. And so here's the interesting thing about that. I did a talk at Java DevOps, where I showed my new fancy version of Spring Data, and I compared them side by side, and no one could tell the difference between my version and Spring Data, and I said, guess what? It's CNP entity beans. It's 15 years old. And so the whole concept of like...
Without the XML.
Without the XML. So that's the key part, My point of that part of the presentation was not to say that Spring Data was bad, but to say that some of the ideas that we tried really early on were actually fairly good ideas, just we didn't have the tools to do them. There were no annotations back then, so all the metadata had to be in XML. Where now you can put all the metadata in.
They had to be backward compatible, not like you. So they had to keep it.
Yeah, so this is basic boilerplate code. So one of the things that Spring Data doesn't do, which you could actually do in CMP, which is fairly useful, is you could actually write some of the query logic yourself. You don't have to use this container abstracted flavor of it all the time.
No, you can write in Spring Data your queries as well if you want.
Just the query, but could you write a whole bunch of Java code? Put it, exactly. Right, sure. So I don't want to is the standard response for people who don't have what they need. Yeah. So here's an alternative, and I'm going to shut this server down. here's an alternative approach. Okay. Right.
Can you do?
Yeah, I can. And now I'm gonna wait for my ID to catch up at some point, or I'll just close this. And I don't know why that re-import didn't work. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So here's the concept. Rather than only having an interface, and by the way, we do support the interface approach. So that if you want to do it like that, you can. You can put all your annotations on your interface, and you can say, I will only use queries that can be defined via the framework. I've been doing EE for a long time, and I forget EE, Enterprise Java, like writing APIs for people to use. You kind of have a couple problems with it. If it's like 80% of what they need, then getting an extra 20% is really, really hard. Like, it's kind of like the Microsoft approach, right? Like, you have this beautiful framework that allows you to do certain things, but the second you want to go outside that, it's like painful. And, you know, there's that problem. The second one is that then the amount of documentation you have to give people is incredibly high for these frameworks that are basically magical, doing all these things for you. And so you as a consumer of that, like a learning curve is pretty steep. It can be easy when you're doing the hello worldy stuff, but then when you want to do the hard stuff again, like you're hitting that wall. And so I decided, all right, let's try something completely different. And yes, we could make a persistence API for you, and then you could have basically something like Spring Data or whatever. But why don't we just take a different approach, and we'll allow you to have your being be abstract, and every method that you don't implement will basically be delegated to you to handle. So it's sort of like a flip, like a spin on maybe interceptors, except we're not intercepting the logic, we're actually implementing it in a reflection-based fashion. So if your bean implements invocation handler, which is just plain old Java lang reflect invocation handler, and your bean is abstract, all we're going to do is we're going to subclass your bean, and all the abstract methods will be filled in to delegate back to the bean. So you can handle your own reuse however you'd like. And so we have something that looks like a Spring Data. It's got a find method that's abstract, and we can say find by category. We pass in the primary key. We get back a category object. We say find by category, and this one has a name. So we have a query param, very JAX-RS inspired, and it's got a name. Here's the query that you would use. There's the string for it. And it returns that. And we have list. And we're going along, and well, this one was a little bit too difficult, too abstract generically, so we just left it. In fact, I actually wrote this code like the Thursday before Java 1 last year, so I didn't have time to do I didn't have time to beat out all of the abstract use cases that I might. And that's sort of real world. You're never going to have infinite time to work on all this stuff. And, you know, so some of them I was able to make abstract, and some of them not. So it's following the 80-20 perspective. You know, when it's useful for you, use it. When it's not, do it yourself. That's a nice kind of happy compromise. The interesting thing about this is that I'm not showing you a framework that's in TomEE. I'm showing you the abstract bean capability that's in TomEE. The framework, the persistence portion, is implemented right here in this project. Right there. These 7 classes is the entire persistence framework. Everything, which is basically 6 annotations and 1 concrete class that has effectively 5 important methods on it. So, as I said, this is very reflection-based, so when any of those abstract methods are invoked, this invoke method gets called, and we just look on the method to see if it has an annotation that we created in our project, and then we're going and just executing the boilerplate code. Here's what the boilerplate persist looks like. So we just say, all right, grab the parameters, grab the first one, that's the primary key. We'll go ahead and go ahead and persist that value. Excuse me, that was not the primary key, that would be the actual object. This one would be primary key. And we just do an entity manager find for the query. We just go ahead and look for a named query annotation on the method, and then we follow what the parameters say. We fill in the named parameters. There's the set parameter, and then we go, if it returns a list, we'll execute typed query return list. Otherwise, we'll execute result. This is your class. You can change it to do what you want. So if it doesn't handle all your use cases, you can enhance it. There are 5 methods in this, which would be way shorter than any presentation you could watch or any documentation you could read. And you have the complete ability to do whatever you want with it, and there's no mystery anymore. So if you want, you can go ahead and slap a breakpoint in there, and then go ahead and run the corresponding test case, which is an Archelian test case. So we can go ahead and say debug, and then we can actually walk through this stuff, and so we don't need to send, emails to some support list or something like that. We can support ourselves. I think that's a more mature approach to frameworks that are effectively auto-magic. If the code, my sort of magical line, if the code is like only that big, why would I hide it from you and then write books about this stuff? Just give you the code and you can do what you want with it. The more interesting thing about this is, go ahead.
But the thing is that it's not hidden, the code. However, if you give you the code, once you have a new idea how you will patch the code. So I'm not saying that I'm a fan of Spring, but it's not like they are really hiding Spring data. However, they have new versions, and if you give you the code and you make your changes like you will do with this solution, maybe you will add the paging and sorting and so on, but however, once they figure out, well, we maybe need something else, what you will do? You will have to merge. So it's we do have a library version of this, and so you can just grab it. It's got a terrible name right now, it's called dry crud, do not repeat yourself, create, remove, update, delete, crud, dry crud. It's like okay, good try, good try. We'll find a better name for it. Anyway, and we do plenty of things in EE that's auto-magic too. I wasn't picking on Spring at all. I'm just simply saying in terms of enterprise Java, we tend to give you cool toys that when you look at the actual implementation of the cool toy isn't a lot of code. And so there is maybe, better to teach someone to fish than to give them a fish sometimes. And so, like I say, that's an experiment. The neat thing about this is that you have the ability to tweak it or do other things. So this is not the only part of your code that you might find redundant. In fact, anywhere that you have code that's basically copy-paste, change, tweak, but somehow it is not easily extractable with maybe generics or something like that, you have the ability now to basically declare that being abstract, implement invocation handler, handle it yourself, craft up your own set of annotations to hint the logic, basically, and then you can write your own generic processing code. So you could throw this nice little capability at your RESTful endpoints to some significant benefit. If you're just basically doing a RESTful endpoint that's doing a query against a database and returning the data straight through, you could abstract that out. If you have any other chunk of code that requires strongly typed
methods where basically the method signature, if you added some annotations to it, could encompass all of your logic, this would be a great thing to throw at it. And so theoretically, you should, creativity is your only limit. So you could reduce a lot of your boilerplate code significantly just by handling the problem at a better level. Now, of course, I could have all those methods be implemented, and they could all delegate to some sort of like method call that I would have. But why not let the reflection handle that? And so have no method there, make them abstract, and then you can handle the delegation yourself in your invocation handler. So it's a nice little spin. Some more interesting, unique things, then we probably have to wrap it up, but slightly different. So who's heard of the connector architecture? All right, we're getting a lot more hands than I'm expecting some of these things. We got about 5 hands. So that's really cool. So the connector architecture is this thing that we put into EE early and then just collected dust immediately afterwards. And so, so basically what it was intended to do is allow you to plug in and consume data from basically any source. So that's a really great thing, unless it's so confusing and complicated and unheard of that you never try it or do anything with it, in which case it doesn't help anybody at all. So we went ahead and fixed it a little bit. So it wasn't bad. It had a good heart, it meant well, but it didn't keep up. Like we didn't update it. When we added annotations into Java, all the specifications changed except for like the ones that people didn't use very often. And connector architecture is one of those. And so, for example, JMS and MDBs. So MDBs are actually not JMS specific. They were in EJB 2.0. Then in EJB 2.1, the connector architecture was added, and they were abstracted from MDBs. And so now MDBs effectively became connector-driven beans, and JMS was just the one connector that was required that a server had to implement. But these other connectors never really showed up. And so the whole world never really got the memo. We didn't really tell anybody. So it's not a mystery why this never caught on. But meanwhile, you had basically this one big do it method all the time. I like to say that the difference between a servlet and JAX-RS is not that what they can do, because obviously both can process HTTP just fine. But JAX-RS is working very hard to understand what you want and give you just the things that you need, whereas the servlet's like, hey, you got a method. It's right over there. It's the same method that everybody gets, and you got all the power. And it's like, yeah, I got all the power, and I got to do all the boilerplate code every time. This sucks. And so, JAX-RS is totally like different. Like, we give you a bunch of annotations. We'll just look at your methods. We'll try and figure it out. If we can't, we'll fail the deployment or whatever, and we'll make it work. And so MDBs ended up with not getting changed, and it had this, on message interface that took message, and then you had to cast it to some sort of thing. All right, so we changed it, and here's an implementation of MDB that actually uses a completely different use case. So here is an MDB and how they can work now. So this is this is EE7 and beyond. And so what we did was we made it so if you have a message listener interface that has nothing in it, then the container will inspect your class just like JAX-RS does, and basically will figure it out. So you're allowed as the connector to make your own annotations, to make your own library. And so this project actually is both a both a JCA or JavaEE connector and an implementer, and an MDB side. So this could be like two different groups. Like, here's what it takes to make a connector. I'll run this first before I give you the big long explanation. Let's just get right to the fun. Here I'm using Archillion not for testing purposes, just because I'm lazy. So I'm going to right click and say run, and it's actually just creating all the packaging for me, deploying my app into the server, and booting it up. Oh, I have a server running. Oh, hold on a second. Kill-9. Hello? I'm sorry, I'm busy right now. Can I help you later? Okay. Alright, we will try again. Alright. Oh.
It's obviously working.
Oh, you're right. No, it's not working. And it's funny because I ran this right before I got in the room. You know you're supposed to sacrifice a chicken before you go up and do live demos? I must have only sacrificed 2. Because I've only done 2 demos successfully. Alright. Let's just see if it's actually responding, but I don't think it is. Yeah. Alright, hold on one moment. I'm going to close all my ideas.
Stop all the debuggers.
Yeah, that's gonna kill all that stuff. So I killed IntelliJ. We'll try one more time. Alright. I'll do it double sure. The old-fashioned way. Okay, that should be fine. Alright. Clean install, skip. Rebuild. Okay. Come on. I don't know why Maven does that. There we go. Ever since they added like parallel build support to Maven, it sometimes hangs on the end waiting for builds to stop, and in fact it's just bad threading code. Alright. We're going to try one more time. Okay. That was already right there. No such luck. All right. Well, that's very anticlimactic. I'll try from the command line just because I'm really stubborn. And actually, I may have just changed. Oh, I think I know what the problem is. Yeah. Yeah. Here we go. We added, this is a good lesson. I'll turn this into a positive. I think it's that it's using, yeah, ASM4, and you need to upgrade your ASM dependency for anything that's Java 8. So that's one of those things that if you're kind of running your own integrations of stuff, any other third-party libraries that use ASM, when you go from one major Java version to the next, ASM will break because the class file format has changed, and it cannot read, like ASM version 4 cannot read Java 8 because it was only Java 7 when it was made, so you have to upgrade to ASM 5. Anyway, I'm going to upgrade my TomEE version. Where's the property for that? Yeah, thank you.
Today, by the way, is exactly 1 year after Java 8 release.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Is it today?
Yeah, it's today.
Awesome. Yeah, I was
No, it's not today.
It is today.
What?
The OTN release. Yeah.
We were at JavaLand, but that's what?
It was end of the month.
No, the OTN release is today, I'm sure. You want to check it?
Does it really matter, guys?
Sure. You guys can check, argue. I will fix the project.
Yeah.
I hope I have all the dependencies required because I have no internet.
Well, you need to switch the Wi-Fi.
There is a Wi-Fi, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
There's a cable somewhere next to me.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
That's not the cable.
Now we got all your passwords.
There's a kilo.
Okay. Yeah. Right. You can get all my open source code. No! Don't take it.
What's the Maven run command?
Oh, see, now I'm getting Facebook notices, so I must have. All right.
How's it run it?
Yeah, here, I have a little Archillion thing that I have because I build up all the war file and stuff like that differently for this one. In connectors, you actually still have to use an ear file, and so I didn't want to make an ear project in Maven. I just made the ear in Archillion using various zip and packaging commands. And so, yeah, I didn't want to go ahead and do that. I'm trying to think now why this thing ran, because I actually did try it out earlier. I must have been using Java 7 in the example, and when I regenerated the project, it might have changed on me. Anyway. Yeah, I can already see ASM 5 coming down. So that would be one of the things that you'd have to do yourself, by the way, if you were running your own Tomcat and you went to upgrade your JVM and then your stack broke. You would have to go find all the libraries that used ASM. You'd have to upgrade every single one of them. You'd have to hope that there were releases of them that used ASM 5. You'd have to get all of your code to agree on that ASM version. And, you know, it can be a pain in the butt.
David, how about if you change the other line J to K?
I could have done that as well. I just, I know I have 7 on here, but
8 is much cooler.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Better to put the work into going forward than backward. I guess that was what I was thinking. Okay. Delete and re-import. Okay, now we will try again. And we'll see if being persistent pays off.
Camera is ready.
Yeah, exactly. It's looking good. There we go. Okay, all right. Yeah. So, I just booted up, thankfully, actually. And isn't this easy? It'll make it look all so easy.
After you fix the ASM, everything is easy.
Exactly. So I'll telnet into the server. So this actually booted TomEE, and there's a telnet server inside inside TomEE. It's like that's the connector, and localhost 2020, and there we go. Now I'm inside the telnet server, which is running in TomEE because it's all Java code. If I type help, I see a bunch of commands, and if I say free memory, it prints 11 megabytes free memory. Where that comes from is basically right here. Here's my little command. Free memory. And this is basically an API that I wrote here in this project. Again, like the persistence thing, I'm not showing you this awesome command capability we wrote. I'm actually showing you the power of the connector architecture for you to write your own stuff. And so I implemented a really trivial telnet server in this project. It's just like, I don't know, a dozen classes. And I made these little option annotations and the default annotation and so on. And then what the connector does is it looks at the bean, it iterates over all the methods, and it says which ones start with command. Okay, I'm going to put them in a map where this is the name. And then when someone on the command line executes that, I'll find this method and I'll execute it, passing in the right parameters. Again, very JAX-RS inspired. So we'll take the command line arguments, we'll pass them in, and we'll execute this stuff. So if I want to go ahead and make a new command, we're going to call it, here, I'll just copy paste. Beer. And we're just going to have it take no arguments. And we're going to return, and I don't know how to spell this. Is that even close?
That's good enough.
Is that good?
Change the S to Z and T to B. Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I'll run this one.
Anyway, you should show this talent thing to Lincoln. It looks pretty much like Forge.
Okay.
Cool, yeah.
Was the Maven target to run the whole thing?
There, like I said, there's you can build this one via Maven. You can't deploy it via Maven because it's effectively your project, and I was too lazy to make it your project. So in Archillion, I will build the archive. So this is the Russian doll ear packaging that I talked about before. You would have to make a library for your RAR, or your connector. First there's, RAR files are like WAR files. They have a lib directory, and you put the libs in there. Then you wrap it up into a RAR like you would make a WAR file. So that's these two archives. And then you would have to make the jar for your test class. Okay, so this is now it's an EJB jar, and then you take all of them and you package them up into an ear, and then you're done. So for me to do this in Maven, I had to have like 4 modules, and that sucks.
No, actually, his question was, how do you run it with Maven? And the answer is, that's just a unit test that just sleeps and that deploys it into
That's
the...
just not correct.
Which unit test? Because I have an idea and I can't see how you run it.
Oh, it's runnable? Or excuse me, you have this project in your...
An idea, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I have this Archillion, this test case. It's not really a test case. It's called Runner. And yeah, if you right-click it and run it.
So it's just an incorrect user of killing.
Exactly.
Or the correct way.
Because just like before, I preferred an incorrect usage of Archillion versus an incorrect usage of Maven, or really a correct version of Maven. But that would be like, I was lazy. I said lazy.
Yeah,
4 modules to get the same result. And in the end, I would have wanted to run it in the IDE so I could show the cool stuff. So I ran the server again. We'll reconnect. Type help. Now we have a beer menu item. You know.
So we can create new vulnerability points like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're just as vulnerable as any of the stuff we stand up on HTTP. We actually have another version of this that's a SSH version.
Yeah, that's much more vulnerable.
Yes, exactly. And so you can get Heartbleed in there too. Right, yeah. So you get all the vulnerabilities that you might possibly want.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So the cool thing is, of course, this is all just native into the Java process itself. So I'll go ahead and run this with debug now.
Can you run it with NAS4 and JavaScript?
You could run JavaScript inside there if you wanted to, and then we could get everything into one project. But yeah, you can run JavaScript in there.
Yeah, outside with NAS4.
I love it. Yeah. I couldn't really get into JavaScript until Nashorn came out, and I could actually just write Maven unit tests against JavaScript.
Yeah.
So you just boot up an engine, and then, yeah, like in a day I was able to, yeah. Well, it's slow, but it's, you know.
It's very expressive. You make it very easy.
Debug runner. Is it already running?
You can prototype it very easy.
It's already running. All right. So now I'm here. Beer. Well, it should execute my debug statement. That's because the server's running not with debug. All right. There we go. Okay. Beer. There we go. So it's neat. You can actually write, like I say, you can write actual command line tools yourself. Command line is not even the only one. So the point of the connector is that you could actually consume messages from anywhere, and you can consume them in your server process. You don't have to stand up external system to translate it into HTTP and then post it in via REST or something like that. If you wanted to take the effort and you wanted to write a email consuming connector, you could do that. Consume email right into your server process like you would consume JMS messages. You know, you could do a chat one, you know, XMCP. You could do a protocol buffers implementation, you know. And basically, any protocol that's out there, you could wrap up as a connector and chuck it into your server and write yourself a little API for consuming it with MVBs, and then suddenly you have de-shackled yourself from HTTP. Well, HTTP is not bad, but there are so many rich clients out there that we're not using because they don't have HTTP support. You know, there's IRC, there's email, there's FTP. If you wanted to FTP junk into your server, you could do that. I mean. Yes, exactly. There's a lot of crazy things that you could do. And I don't know that they're good ideas, but sky's the limit. So I think it's pretty neat in that regard. But yeah, we do a lot of stuff in TomEE that's maybe a little bit unorthodox. This was something that we implemented that we actually able to get into E7, which is pretty cool. All right, so I showed you code. So thank you to all the people who put support for TomEE into their products. So Jelastic, Idea, you know, IntelliJ. I got to update this list. NetBeans went ahead and put an adapter in there. Basically, everybody who supported Tomcat and then realized that TomEE's Tomcat went ahead and like copy pasted their code and put TomEE on it, and then said, "Look, we support TomEE." And we said, "Thank you." Yeah, and in fact, IntelliJ, they didn't even like copy their adapter. They just like, oh, okay. And they went into their config file and added TomEE at the end of their Tomcat adapter. So now if you go to set up anything, Tomcat or TomEE in IntelliJ, you have to see Tomcat/TomEE, you know. They didn't even make a separate adapter. Like, it's all the same. It works fine. It was pretty cool. At like one Java 1, I went around to, you know, Jelastic and CloudBees and like all the places and said, hey, you should add support for TomEE in your cloud. Like, oh, you know, it's really expensive. We got to do all this testing all over again and stuff like that. How popular is that? Like justify it to us. And it's like, well, you support Tomcat? Yeah, well, just give it a try. And then it was, I saw, the first one that did it was Yevgeny from Zero Turnaround. I saw him at a conference and I said, hey, you know, you should add TomEE support into JRebel. He's like, yeah, okay, whatever, we'll take a look at it. 2 weeks later, there was an announcement that they supported, you know, it's like, yeah, they were coding heads down for 2 weeks.
So they did only
that, I meant that in a Bulgarian way. What's that?
No, I mean only 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, because it probably took them a week to write the press release.
Exactly.
But the cool thing about that is if you're using Tomcat already, for you to roll out TomEE should be just as easy. If JRebel can put support for TomEE into their product in 2 weeks and release it and announce it, you should be able to try it out yourself. If you have a whole bunch of tools using Tomcat, a bunch of scripts and a bunch of build stuff and provisioning whatchamajiggers. You know, it's a fancy new word. It's, hashtag whatchamajigger. Yeah, so if you got all that fancy stuff in there, it should be no problem for you to do all that stuff and try TomEE out. So thank you to those people. And of course, you know, thank you for listening to me talk for a very long time and suffering through my ASM problems. I hope you enjoyed this talk. If you have any questions, yeah?
Is there some big sites or whatever that are currently using TomEE? This is the first question. The second one is there some platform as a service that provides TomEE as an option?
Yeah. That one on the top?
Yeah, but I mean not in their product, but hosting their production website on TomEE.
Well, yeah, there's two questions, right? Yeah, so the first question was like, who's using this TomEE stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, not kind of, definitely was that, right? Like, you know.
Why should we care?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, before you start answering, this is the guy that made me write Spring until 1 o'clock this night.
Okay, yeah, great. So then the second one, like the hosting, Jelastic, they would be the primary one that would point you at if you wanted to deploy an app in the cloud, you know, and just like pay somebody. Jelastic, right? Exactly, because you don't want to like do it yourself, you know. It's called platform as a service, not platform as a donation, you know. So you got to pay. Yeah, so Jelastic, that would recommend that. Although if you're fine rolling your sleeves up, you can take Beanstalk and take that image, drop in the Tomcat TomEE libs over top of the Tomcat install that's there, and boot it up, and it will work. So we've done that ourselves plenty of times. We actually run our website on Beanstalk using TomEE. And we first did it in WordPress on Heroku, and then we switched it over to using basically Quarkus, which is like a Java implementation of PHP. And we run it on Beanstalk on TomEE, just because we like to do fun things like that. Why not? Exactly. Because if science teaches us anything, if you can, you should. Right? Isn't that how it's supposed to go? That was the moral story of Jurassic Park, wasn't it? That we should all be making dinosaurs? And then the second question is, you know, I know like Dassault Systems, they use it extensively, so they have a cloud platform, you know, that deploys it. Virgin Atlantic, they're deploying it all across all their airports in Australia. And so, you know, you walk in kiosks, TomEE's running inside there. And then other people that I can't mention because they're customers. And so once we sign an NDA, then I can get sued majorly by mentioning them. But I'll say there's over $30 billion was done on TomEE last year in online revenue.
So you're rich?
No, that's not my money. You asked me what other people are doing.
One question. Yeah, okay, so the question is, actually, you work like with Lego, so you take different components, put them together. How much code do you write inside?
Yeah, that's a cool question. So the very first version of TomEE, we only had an additional 70 classes. 70 classes, Java classes, integration code, right? You know, because basically a lot of the stuff was in all the existing components. One of them was OpenEJB, which had been filling integration gaps for a very long time. So for us to do, you know, basically to drop the jars in and then get it across the finish line, we had to add about 70 classes. So it's not a lot, but it's not a little either. I always try to remind people that when you take and put all these things into Tomcat yourself, there is an assumption that is made that you have the full functionality of, say, like JPA or CDI, and in fact, it's not the case. A lot of these libraries don't implement all of the specification because in parts where the specification requires integration with another spec,
Okay, so
these projects will typically punt.
here's the glue code to write this.
Exactly. And so, so for example, OpenJPA does not implement container-managed entity managers. Basically, where you're tracking the entity manager in a transaction so that everybody can use the same entity manager. So I promise you that everybody here who's using any sort of JPA in Tomcat is using an entity manager factory and not entity manager injection, because it's not supported in Tomcat, and I'm really not aware of any libraries that are encouraging that. But meanwhile, to make it work, you just simply have to proxy the entity manager, and then when someone makes a call on it, you look in the transaction, you grab it, you make the call, and you put it back in the transaction. And a transaction is just a map, and when you say commit, we go through the whole list, and we say commit on the connection, underlying connection. It's ultimately no different than entity manager start entity transaction, except you could have two persistence entity managers participate in the same transaction, whereas you can't do that on your own.
Okay, the second question is how many steps are you back from Tomcat? Or you have no, actually, some lag from the Tomcat releases?
Well, we try, the question was how far behind the latest Tomcat release are we?
Latest stuff,
Yeah, we try to stay on top of that. So it's going to be, our release cycle is maybe every 4 months, and the Tomcat release cycle is about every month and a half. And so we're usually fairly up to speed. The only time that we will be guaranteed to have a release out like really quickly is when there's a security bug in Tomcat, and they issue a release. We're going to issue a release of TomEE with just a Tomcat upgrade immediately. You know, to make sure that that's taken care of. So we try to keep within 2 weeks of the security bug issue. So we try and stay on it, because if we're lagging behind, and then again, that's not useful for people. Any other questions?
My question is a bit long one. So
wait. Have they been short up to this point?
Kind of. I'm not against spec, but I believe that we should somehow push the specs. I mean, we should.
I fully agree with you.
So you said that you have a TomEE and TomEE Plus, which is somewhere in between the web profile and the full profile.
Right.
Do you have any plans to make TomEE minus whatever? I mean, a version of TomEE that is built on Tomcat, but which puts some stuff which is not in the EE full profile. What do I mean? JCache, for example, which is not in EE7, or another connection to, like, you know, the TC server from Pivotal?
Yeah.
They put a lot of crap which is not in the spec, but it
I wouldn't
works.
describe it as crap, but yeah.
Yeah, it works, it helps. So,
Yeah.
so do you plan to really, have you researched or, I don't know, tried to do something which is not like on the spec, which is again built on top of Tomcat, which is not,
Sure. Mean like,
plans to
you mean like the abstract bean stuff that I showed that's not in the spec, or the connector stuff that wasn't in the spec that we got added to the spec?
No, but the thing is that what you said is the glue code. So if I want to use JCache or I don't know, whatever, Heroku or whatever,
Yeah.
but I have to write the glue code. So do you have any plans to make a TomEE version which has a lot of third-party libraries which are not in the spec, and you to provide the glue code for them? So the people can choose TomEE instead of TC server or instead of some other server which is also based on Tomcat, because they really like JCache and they don't want to wait for JavaEE 8, or maybe it's not in the spec at all, they just want to use it and they don't want to spend time writing glue code. Because what now happens is I don't want to spend time typing glue code, so
Sure.
I have to go to Spring. Because Spring have the glue for like everything, right?
He makes me.
So
Yeah. Yeah, well, so absolutely. So we did a webinar 4 hours ago about using JCache in TomEE with Hazelcast. So, for example,
it's the only production-ready JCache. So
sure, right, exactly. So, do we plan to do that? We did 4 hours ago. Yeah, we plan to continue doing stuff like that. And in fact, if you have anything that you really need, I would encourage you to, shoot a note to the mailing list and say, this is not in the spec. I don't care. I like it. What I'm trying to say, it's okay to like TomEE because you like integration. That's the whole concept of it. And so if you have things that you want and need, let us know. We will try and do it. Or if you have time, you can do it, and we'll just commit your code. Make a pull request. And there are really two reasons to use TomEE. There's probably more, but you can either come at it from the JavaEE angle because you want something certified, or you can come at it from the other angle, which is I don't care about certification. I just want to save my own time. And if you were going to do some integration of some third-party stuff into Tomcat anyway, put them in TomEE. We'll check it in. We'll share it with everybody. And so we have absolutely no problem doing that. And if we need to come up with another flavor of TomEE to make people happy, fine, we'll do that. Or we'll just put it right in there. We made the JaxRS version of TomEE before it was part of the web profile just because people wanted it.
Do you know the Spring Boot website? That basically they are listing their own projects, and you can put checkpoints wherever you like, and they are giving you the POM and everything just works. So why? I mean, I like TomEE. However, what I would like is I don't need, ActiveMQ, for example. I want to just go to the website and say I want a custom TomEE. I want Tomcat and I want this. So everything is coming as a TomEE zip, and everything works with only the glue code between these frameworks. And I believe this will be great.
So basically the embedded version of TomEE doesn't have profiles like web profile or JaxRS. In fact, it's just the minimum. And you can use Maven, plain old Maven dependencies to add the things that you want. And we just published a blog post called 50 Shades of TomEE, which basically shows you how to take and use the plugin, Maven Shade plugin, to make an Uber jar, basically like a Spring Boot. So you would basically use Maven dependencies, not check marks on a website.
It's the same.
But if you have the ability to use Maven and you know how to declare dependencies, you can do that. And so you would basically take TomEE embedded Maven dependency, TomEE dash embedded, and you would go TomEE dash JaxRS, and then that will give you the glue code plus the dependencies to run that glue code, and you can have yourself an Uber jar of TomEE. And I have that now, actually. Why am I talking about it? And I could just show you.
Or just write an Archillian test.
Right. Or just write an Archillian test. Yeah, so here's the blog post.
It's 50 Shades of TomEE, so
yeah,
we'll remember it.
Yeah, well anyway, basically, this is the one you want. So pay attention to that particular section of the blog post. And this one has a project. We can actually grab this and we can check it out and build it. Git clone. And I probably have to download a whole bunch of stuff because I haven't built this one already, so this one may or may not. I'll just open the project. So small little project, just 3 little class files, a POM, and then the shade configuration. And this one uses TomEE 2.0, which is EE7 based. And yeah, that's all that's required to get yourself your own Spring Boot. And so, yeah, it's pretty tiny, and you can add more stuff to it if you want. You can add like JMS if you want that in your Uber jar. And then you would just simply run this thing, you know, java-jar, and you're off and running. I guess it's a popular expression, Bob's your uncle. I just learned that one. Yeah, it's apparently like, and now everything works.
What was that previous one with the hashtag?
Oh, whatchamajigger?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatchamajigger?
Yeah. That one you might hear in the cartoon Futurama once. We use that often. Yeah. Anyway, so that's what we're talking about, right? Yeah, so that's totally there as well. You know, we don't see EE as a stopping point, we see it as a starting point. And you know, it's, for us it's not a limitation and in a place where to not to do any work. But it could be, you know, I think the difference between this is that when we do things like this, we want to later add them into the specs so they become standard and everybody has to do them. And when you're going the Spring route, that would be the one thing that I would hope that they do someday is maybe participate more in the standards. There was a recent exchange between Spring Central and myself on Twitter where the conversation sort of started out maybe a little tense, but then we came to have an agreement, which was, you know, it's awesome to go way out ahead of the specs and innovate. That's where innovation comes from. It should end up at a standards level, and so we as an industry just can kind of keep going forward together rather than only in our own directions. So I think if we could have our cake and eat it too, innovate and standardize, that would be the best scenario for the industry as a whole, in my opinion. We do have some shirts, and did you want me to give away some other things? Just the shirts?
No, they're there.
Yeah, okay, well you're texting me and I didn't read your texts. Tell me. Okay, I could do that, hold on guys. I gotta unlock my phone, check my WhatsApp. Oh, now I finally got it because it takes a while. They show you your lock screen, when you go to read the app. Okay. All right, there was nothing important in there other than to remember to hand out the shirt. All right, so let me go back to the thank you page.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, all right, so thank you very much. I'm sure there are more questions, but I can answer them later. And, you know, thanks guys, I appreciate it.